The sky above High Mesa burned with the last light of day, streaked with amber and ash. The wind carried whispers of old stories as it curled through the canyons and danced along the dry corral fences of the High Mesa Canine Academy. Dust hung in the air, kicked up by restless boots and anxious hearts. A crowd had gathered, not out of ceremony but curiosity. At the center of the ring stood a solitary figure. Shadow, a massive German shepherd whose very presence seemed carved from legend. His coat was thick with age, his stance still sharp. A faded scar cut across his muzzle, and one ear was notched like a badge of honor. No leash held him. No command controlled him. Not anymore. He had once served beside a man now gone, Logan Morgan, one of the finest military dog trainers the Army had ever known. After Logan's death 2 years ago in the field, Shadow had never bonded again, never trusted. And so they brought him here to wait. For something or someone. She wasn't what anyone expected. Leah Morgan, 10 years old, stepped through the dust like she belonged there. Her boots were scuffed, her jeans patched to the knees, and her long chestnut hair was tied back in a haphazard braid. There was nothing dramatic about her entrance. No fanfare, no hesitation, just quiet, determined steps toward the corral. Whispers rippled through the crowd. A child alone? But those who knew the Morgans didn't ask. Her family had trained dogs for 3 generations. Her grandfather, a legend in civilian search and rescue. Her father, a decorated military handler. After he died in Afghanistan 2 years earlier, people expected Leah would turn away from the path. But instead, she clung to it fiercely. She had never picked a dog. Not yet. She watched hundreds, worked beside dozens, but never once claimed one as her own. Her grandfather said she was waiting for the right one. Her uncle said she was too picky. But Leah knew she needed to feel something. An instinct, a pull, not just obedience. A connection. And today, something was different. Leah had heard of High Mesa Canine Academy from the stories her grandfather told. Of a place where dogs that no one else could reach were given one last chance. For months, she'd begged to visit. She'd watched videos, read every article, even marked the academy's location on a map beside her bed. She believed, truly believed, that somewhere out there was a dog waiting for her. Fastest, not the most obedient, but the one that would understand her the way no one else did. And when her grandfather finally agreed to bring her to High Mesa that fall afternoon, she knew it in her bones. This was it. Her eyes locked on Shadow across the corral. He didn't growl, didn't move, just stared back with a quiet intensity that matched her own. A flicker of something passed between them. Recognition, perhaps, or memory. He stepped forward. Her small hand rose, fingers spread, mimicking a command gesture her father used to teach her in the backyard. Simple, clear. Shadow's ears twitched. Then, slowly, he sat. Gasps echoed from the fence line. Leah didn't smile. She didn't celebrate. She just stepped closer, calm and steady, as if this moment had been waiting for them both. And maybe it had. Illy Red Hawk had seen a lot in his years. Dogs who'd chewed through steel crates. Handlers who'd walked into war zones with nothing but a leash and raw courage. But he had never seen anything like this. A 10-year-old girl commanding a war dog with a single gesture. That wasn't training. That was instinct. That was legacy. The murmur swelled behind him as Leah moved closer to Shadow. The dog didn't flinch. He watched her with those mismatched eyes. One sharp gold, the other clouded like smoke. But there was no threat in him, just curiosity. Maybe something deeper. Leah stopped a foot away. She didn't reach out. She didn't speak. She just crouched, her eyes level with his. Then she whispered something. A single word. Shadow blinked. His tail gave one, slow, cautious sweep. Eli stepped forward. You know what he just did, don't you? Leah stood, brushing the dust from her jeans. He listened. No one's been able to do that. Not in 2 years. She nodded quiet and sure. I didn't make him. He chose. Eli looked down at the dog, then back at her. The corral was silent, except for the wind brushing the pine trees. Where'd you learn that signal? Leah glanced at the ground, then up again. My dad, he used to practice in our backyard. I memorized everything. There it was. Recognition. Not just between a girl and a dog, but memory passed through blood and bone. Shadow stepped forward, pressing his broad head into Leia's chest like it was the most natural thing in the world. She staggered, not from fear, but from the sheer weight of it. She wrapped her arms around his neck, burying her face in his fur, and for the first time in years, Shadow closed his eyes. He was home. No one in the family understood why she chose that dog. Shadow had a reputation. Feral, untrainable, dangerous even by seasoned standards. If grown men with decades of experience had failed to reach him, what chance did a 10-year-old girl have? Whispers floated around the dinner table. Quiet nods exchanged behind her back. This wasn't just a bold choice. It was reckless. But maybe they said it was time. 2 years since Logan's death. 2 years since Leia had thrown herself into training, but never picked a single dog. She clung to a set of personal rules. Strict, specific, rooted in instincts only she seemed to understand. And maybe this failure, when it inevitably came, would shake those rules loose. Make her see that training couldn't live on gut feeling alone. They didn't say it out loud, but they thought it, all of them. And Leia heard it too, even if no one spoke. Unfolded like something out of a story. Leia had always believed she'd someday live. She stayed at the academy with her grandfather, who didn't say much but watched everything, especially the way Shadow followed her. Not out of habit, but choice. Leia didn't treat him like a broken soldier. She didn't push, didn't demand. She simply walked, trained, spoke in that quiet, thoughtful way her father used to, and let Shadow come to her in his own time. And he did. He moved when she moved, sat when she paused, watched the world through a rhythm. It wasn't obedience. It was understanding. Trainers around the academy whispered about it. Some scoffed. Others stared in awe. A child forming a bond that seasoned professionals couldn't touch. Eli just shook his head and muttered, "Damn dog was waiting for her all this time." One afternoon, while Leia and Shadow walked the perimeter of the property, her grandfather finally spoke. "You thinking he's the one?" he asked. Leia nodded. "I don't think, I know." He grunted softly. "About time." She looked up at him. "I wasn't waiting for just any dog, Grandpa. I was waiting for mine." Shadow nudged her side at that moment, as if seconding the motion. Her grandfather watched, and in his eyes, a flash of memory. Logan, his son, young and proud, once walking this very path with a black fur partner beside him. Now his granddaughter did the same, with a dog who remembered, too. It wasn't just companionship. It was a legacy rediscovered. And for the first time since Logan's death, the Morgan family saw not just a shadow of the past, but the shape of a future. Their first competition was small, just a local working dog showcase in northern Colorado. No fanfare, no TV cameras. Just handlers, dogs, and dirt. Leia didn't care. Shadow, even older and stiff in one leg, moved with the precision of a soldier. Every command was a whisper between them. Every maneuver felt less like a drill and more like a dance. They didn't just win. They stunned. By the end of the season, they had placed in every event they entered agility, obedience, tactical response, even scent tracking. Not because Shadow was the fastest or strongest. Not because he was the fastest, but because he listened like no other dog. Because he trusted. And trust, it turned out, was something the world was desperate to see again. News crews started showing up. Interviews followed. The prodigy and her warrior dog, one magazine called them. To the public, they were a miracle. To trainers, they were a mystery. But to Leia, it was simple. Shadow was hers. Some said she got lucky. Others said she rode on her father's name. Leia didn't argue. She just kept working. Between competitions, she trained quietly back at High Mesa, still sleeping in Cabin 6, still rising before dawn. Shadow never left her side, except to chase off the occasional squirrel or nap under the grandfather tree. One day, while cleaning trophies and polishing gear, Eli passed by and paused at the doorway. "Do you ever get tired of proving them wrong?" he asked. Leia glanced up, a soft smile tugging at her mouth. "Not yet." Shadow thumped his tail once, as if in agreement. And with each passing month, the legend of the little girl and the old warrior dog only grew. It happened on a quiet morning in early spring. By then, their names were already known across the circuit. Leia and Shadow had swept the Midwest regional trials in 3 categories: off-leash obedience, rapid recall, and tactical tracking. One judge wrote in his notes, "Not handler and dog, more like soulmates in motion." But it hadn't come easy. Every morning, rain or frost, they trained. Leela built obstacle courses out of hay bales and broken fencing. Shadow, no longer as fast as the others, made up for it with perfect control, intuition, and the kind of loyalty you couldn't teach. They studied each other, not with commands, but with silence. At night, they reviewed videos of their runs. Leia scribbling notes on a yellow notepad. Shadow curled beside her, head on her foot. Her grandfather often watched from the hallway, not saying a word, just letting the scene imprint itself into memory. They weren't just a team. They were a legacy in motion. ISA was oiling Shadow's harness when a tall woman in a weathered field jacket stepped onto the porch of the academy. Her name was Avery Collins, and she introduced herself as an old friend of Logan Morgan, Leia's father. She had served with him during his last deployment. When she heard about the girl and the old war dog making headlines, something clicked. She'd seen Shadow once, years ago. Not for long, but long enough to remember. She sat with Leia and her grandfather on the porch, watching Shadow nap in the sun. "That dog," Avery said, voice thick with emotion, "was assigned to your dad, only for a few weeks. But they move like they've been together forever." Leia's breath caught. He called him his second Shadow. Avery continued, said he never had to speak twice, said he finally understood what it meant to trust without question. Her grandfather stayed silent, eyes on the horizon. "I thought Shadow died with him," Avery said, almost to herself. "But I guess he just waited." Leia looked at the old dog, curled beside her boots. Suddenly, everything made sense. The familiarity, the quiet understanding, the bond that had never needed words. "He's the last piece of my dad," she whispered. Avery nodded, tears welling. "And maybe you're the last piece of him." They didn't speak much after that. They didn't need to. In that quiet moment, Leia remembered the early days. How Shadow hadn't growled when she first approached. How his body had relaxed at her father's hand signals. How his eyes had watched her like he was searching for something lost. It wasn't just memory. It was muscle. It was scent. It was blood. She had her father's way of walking. Steady, sure, always from the left. She gave commands with the same clip precision, the same open palm. Even her voice carried an echo of his cadence, low and deliberate. And Shadow, old as he was, had remembered, not with thought, but with instinct, with heart. That was why he sat before the crowd, why he leaned into her chest that first day, why he had never looked at another handler the same way. Because for Shadow, she wasn't just a girl, she was his girl. The sun dipped lower behind the pines, casting long shadows across the academy grounds. And in that golden light, the story of a girl, her father, and the dog who had loved them both came quietly full circle. Time moved, as it always does, quietly, persistently. Leia grew into herself. By 16, she was no longer just a girl with the old war dog. She was a force. Calm, deliberate, and respected in circles far beyond High Mesa. Trainers sought her out. Families brought troubled dogs from across the country, hoping she could do what no one else could. And always, Shadow was with her. He was slower now. The white in his muzzle had spread to his chest and paws. He slept more, barked less, but never stopped watching, never stopped following. Yet in his eyes, the same unwavering loyalty remained, a silent testament to the bond they shared. Until one morning, he didn't. Leia found him beneath the grandfather tree, the great pine that had witnessed every stage of their journey. He lay curled, paws tucked beneath his chest, eyes closed, body still, the worn leather collar still around his neck. She knelt beside him, fingers finding a familiar spot behind his ear. It was cold, too still. They buried him there that afternoon, beneath the same tree, wrapped in the training blanket from their first victory. The whole academy came. No speeches, no songs, just the rustling of pine needles and the kind of silence only love can hold. That night, Leia returned alone. The moon cast silver ribbons across the ground. She sat by the grave, fingers resting on the freshly turned earth. Then, slowly, she removed the collar from her wrist, the one she'd worn every day since the beginning, and looped it gently around a low branch, not as a leash, as a vow. "You were more than a partner," she whispered. "You were the proof I needed of love, of loyalty, of everything you left behind." And as the wind passed through the pine, soft and sure, it sounded, just for a moment, like the jingle of tags fading into memory. Grief didn't break her. It refined her. In the weeks that followed, Leia didn't disappear into silence. She returned to work. Slowly, deliberately, she walked the field Shadow once patrolled, repaired the agility course, repainted the faded academy sign by the gate. There was a steadiness to her now, deeper than before, quieter, but stronger, and the dogs responded. One by one, they came to her, anxious, aggressive, withdrawn. Leia didn't approach with force. She waited, listened, let each one speak in its own language. And when they did, she answered, not with commands, but with understanding. Her grandfather called it Morgan patience, but Leia called it something else. "Every dog has a story," she once said to a class of new trainers, "and your job isn't to control it. It's to hear it." They began calling it the Morgan method. It wasn't about dominance or hierarchy. It was about connection, about seeing the value in imperfection, and knowing that even broken things could shine. Within a year, her approach reshaped the academy. More rescues were accepted. More teens came through the doors, sent by schools or families who didn't know what else to do. And Leia, just 16, found herself mentoring others the way her father and Shadow had mentored her. She didn't forget them. She carried them in the leather collar she still wore, now looped around her wrist like a second heartbeat, in the way she crouched beside every dog, never above, always equal, in the stories she told, and the ones she helped others find. We're right, because Leia had learned the truth. Training dogs wasn't about power. It was about trust. One evening, long after the fields had emptied and the kennels had gone quiet, Leia walked out to the grandfather tree alone. She knelt beside the stone marker, fingers tracing the worn engraving. He served with loyalty. He loved without fear. He laughed as family. A breeze rustled through the branches. Not cold, not sad, just steady. Like him, Leia smiled, the kind that sits behind your eyes more than on your lips. "I kept my promise," she whispered. And she had. She had built something not just from skill, but from memory, not just from training, but from love. Shadow hadn't been her beginning, but he had made sure she found it. She rose slowly, brushing pine needles from her jeans, and looked out across the academy, alive with motion, purpose, and new beginnings. Then she turned and walked back toward the lights, not as a girl who once needed a dog, but as the woman who had become one because of M.